where faith, inspiration, and storytelling come together to bring the Bible to life like never before. Our mission is to take you on a spiritual journey through the Bible's stories, from the creation in Genesis to the revelations of the end times. Welcome to Timeless Bible Journeys.
Have you ever faced a moment in life where you felt completely unqualified? Maybe you were given a responsibility that seemed too big, a challenge that felt impossible, or a task that made you question your own abilities. Self-doubt is something we all experience. It whispers in our minds, telling us we're not strong enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. But what if I told you that some of the greatest leaders in history, the ones who changed the course of nations, started out feeling exactly the same way? Today we're diving into the story of Gideon, one of the most unlikely heroes in the Bible. When we first meet him, he isn't leading an army. He isn't standing with confidence. He's hiding. Afraid, uncertain, and filled with doubt. And yet, despite all of this, he is chosen for something extraordinary. Gideon's journey from fear to faith, from hesitation to bold action, is packed with powerful life lessons that are just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. His story teaches us about courage, leadership, humility, and what it really means to trust in something greater than ourselves. So, if you've ever felt like you're not good enough, if you've ever wrestled with fear or uncertainty, this video is for you. Because Gideon's story isn't just about him, it's about all of us. Stick around until the end, because these lessons might just change the way you see yourself and your purpose. And before we get started, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin. You are more than your doubts. Have you ever felt too small, too weak, or too unqualified to make a real difference? Maybe you've looked at your circumstances, your past failures, or even the people around you and thought, there's no way I can do this. If that sounds familiar, then you have something in common with Gideon. When we first meet Gideon in the book of Judges, he isn't leading an army or standing in confidence. He's hiding. The Israelites are being oppressed by the Midianites, and instead of fighting back, Gideon is secretly threshing wheat in a winepress, doing his best to stay unnoticed. He sees himself as powerless, just trying to survive. And then something unexpected happens. An angel of the Lord appears to him and says something shocking. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Judges 6 verse 12. A mighty warrior. Gideon certainly doesn't feel like one. In fact, his response is filled with doubt. "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." Judges 6:15. Think about that for a moment. Gideon immediately lists all the reasons he believes he isn't capable. He focuses on his background, his status, and his own perceived limitations. How often do we do the same thing? How often do we tell ourselves, "I'm not smart enough. I don't have the right connections. I've made too many mistakes. There are so many others who are better than me." But here's what's remarkable about Gideon's story. His doubts didn't define him. God saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself. Gideon thought he was weak, but God called him strong. Gideon thought he was insignificant, but God saw a leader. And that's the first lesson from his story. You are more than your doubts. Overcoming self-doubt. Self-doubt is one of the biggest obstacles we face in life. It can keep us from pursuing our dreams, stepping into leadership, or even making positive changes. But Gideon's story shows us that what matters isn't how we see ourselves. It's how we respond when we're called to something greater. So, how do we move beyond our doubts? Here are 3 things we can learn from Gideon's experience. 1. Acknowledge your fears, but don't let them stop you. Gideon was afraid, and he was honest about it. But fear itself isn't the problem. It's letting fear control us that holds us back. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to move forward despite it. 2. Trust that you are chosen for a reason. Gideon didn't believe he was capable, but God chose him anyway. The same applies to us. Sometimes we're given opportunities or responsibilities that feel overwhelming, but if we've been placed in a situation, it's often because we're meant to be there. 3. Take the first step, even if you're unsure. Gideon didn't transform overnight. His confidence grew as he took action. The same is true for us. Sometimes, the only way to overcome doubt is to take the first step and trust that clarity and strength will follow. Gideon's story reminds us that we are more than our insecurities, more than our past, and more than the fears that hold us back. If he had stayed in that wine press, too afraid to step into his calling, he would have missed out on the incredible purpose that was waiting for him. So the question is, what are you allowing self-doubt to hold you back from? Think about it, and if you've ever felt like you're not enough, let Gideon's story be your reminder. You are stronger than you think. Faith requires action. Have you ever found yourself waiting for the perfect sign before taking action? Maybe you've had a dream, a goal, or even a calling, but you've hesitated, hoping for absolute certainty before making a move. If that sounds familiar, then you'll relate to Gideon. Gideon wasn't a man of immediate confidence. Even after being called a mighty warrior, he didn't jump into action right away. Instead, he hesitated. He needed proof. He needed reassurance. And so, he asked for a sign, seeking signs but not stalling in fear. In Judges 6:36-40, we see one of the most well-known moments in Gideon's story, the fleece test. Gideon, still unsure of his calling, asks God for confirmation. First, he requests that a fleece of wool be wet with dew while the ground around it remains dry. When that happens, he asks for the opposite. This time, the fleece stays dry while the ground is wet. Now, at first glance, it might seem like Gideon is simply being careful. And in some ways, that's understandable. We all want to be sure before making big decisions. But here's the key takeaway. Gideon sought assurance, but he didn't let doubt paralyze him. Too often, people use doubt as an excuse to do nothing. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect conditions, or the perfect level of confidence before they take action. But faith doesn't work like that. Faith isn't about having every answer before stepping forward. It's about trusting enough to move even when you don't. Faith is an active choice. Many people assume that faith is simply believing in something, but in reality, faith requires action. Faith isn't just knowing the right path, it's taking the first step. Faith isn't just hoping for a better future, it's making decisions that move you toward it. Faith isn't just trusting in a higher power, it's living in a way that reflects that trust. Gideon could have asked for 10 more signs. He could have spent weeks or months debating whether he was truly meant for this mission. But at some point he had to stop asking and start acting. And when he did, incredible things happened. Taking action, even when it feels impossible. One of the most powerful moments in Gideon's story comes when God calls him to fight the Midianites. But instead of giving him a massive army, God does the opposite. He tells Gideon to reduce his forces. You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Judges 7:02. Gideon watches his army shrink from 3, 2, 0, 0, 0 men to just 300. From a human perspective, this makes no sense. But faith isn't about relying on logic alone. It's about trusting in something greater than yourself. Imagine how Gideon must have felt. He had already doubted himself. He had already needed reassurance, and now he was being asked to fight an enemy with a force that seemed laughably small. But here's what makes the difference. Gideon obeyed. He moved forward anyway. And the result? A miraculous victory. Not because of numbers, not because of strategy, but because of faith put into action. Faith without action leads nowhere. This lesson applies to every part of life. You might have faith that you can build a better future, but are you taking steps toward it? You might believe you're meant for something greater, but are you putting in the effort? You might trust that things will improve, but are you making choices that align with that trust? Faith alone isn't enough. It has to be accompanied by movement, by choices, by real action. Gideon didn't win his battle just by believing. He won because he believed enough to act. Faith requires more than just thought. It requires movement. Gideon's story teaches us that while it's okay to seek assurance, at some point we must take the first step. So here's the question for you. What have you been waiting for? What's the one thing you know you should be doing, but fear or uncertainty has held you back? If Gideon had let fear stop him, he never would have become the leader he was meant to be. And if you let fear stop you, you might never step into the purpose meant for you. So take that step, move forward, because faith, real faith, always requires action. Strength isn't always found in numbers. We live in a world that tells us bigger is better. More resources, more followers, more connections. More of everything seems to equal success. But what if true strength isn't found in numbers? What if, sometimes, having less actually puts you in a position to achieve more? That's exactly what Gideon learned. His story is a powerful reminder that victory doesn't always come from having the most, the strongest, or the best equipped. Instead, it comes from knowing where your strength really lies. Gideon's army, a test of trust. After finally accepting his calling, Gideon gathers an army to fight against the Midianites, Israel's oppressors. At first, things seem promising. He has 3,2,0,0,0 men ready for battle. But then, something unexpected happens. God tells him, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Judges 7:02. Think about that for a moment. Too many men? Normally in war, the bigger your army, the better your chances. But God knew something important. If Gideon won with a large army, the Israelites would think they had succeeded by their own strength. They would forget who was truly guiding them. So God tells Gideon to reduce his army. First, he lets all the fearful soldiers go home. 2, 0, 0, 0, 0 men leave, leaving just 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Then God makes another cut, this time choosing only 300 men based on how they drink water from a stream. From 3,2,0,0 soldiers to just 300. Less is more when you're in the right hands. Imagine how Gideon must have felt. The Midianite army was vast, 1,3,5,0,0 soldiers strong. His force had already been outnumbered, and now it was nearly non-existent. From a human perspective, this was a guaranteed disaster. But this was never about human logic, it was about faith. Gideon had to trust that his strength didn't come from numbers, weapons, or strategy. It came from something greater. And because he trusted, he led his small army into battle with nothing but trumpets, torches, and jars. No swords, no chariots, just obedience. And what happened? The Midianites, confused and terrified, turned on each other. Gideon's tiny force won a battle that should have been impossible. Strength comes from trust, not size. This moment in Gideon's story challenges the way we think about strength. It's easy to assume that success requires vast resources, perfect conditions, or overwhelming support. But Gideon's victory shows us that sometimes being stripped down to the essentials forces us to rely on what truly matters. This lesson applies to every area of life. In business or career, you don't need a massive budget or a huge team to succeed. Some of the most successful businesses started in garages with just a handful of committed people. In personal growth, strength isn't about how many people support you. It's about how determined you are to keep going, even when you feel alone. In faith and leadership, true leadership isn't about having an army of followers. It's about being willing to stand firm even when it feels like you're standing alone. What's holding you back? Maybe you've been waiting until you have enough before taking action. Enough money, enough connections, enough confidence. But Gideon's story proves that enough isn't about quantity. It's about trust. He didn't win because of his army's size. He won because he was willing to believe that strength doesn't always come from numbers. So here's the question for you. What have you been waiting for? What area of your life have you been holding back thinking you don't have enough? Because if Gideon could defeat an entire army with just 300 men, imagine what you could do. If you stop focusing on what you lack and start trusting in what you already have, success can lead to complacency. Success is a dangerous thing, not because achieving it is wrong, but because what happens afterward can define a person even more than the journey to get there. We often assume that challenges are what test us the most. But sometimes the greatest test comes after the battle has been won. When comfort sets in, when recognition inflates the ego, and when the hunger that once drove us fades away. This is exactly what happened to Gideon. His story isn't just about courage in the face of fear. It's also a warning about how success, if not handled wisely, can lead to complacency, pride, and even downfall. Gideon's journey is one of the most inspiring in the Bible. He starts out fearful and uncertain, but becomes a bold leader who delivers Israel from oppression. With just 300 men, he defeats a massive Midianite army, not through human strength, but through trust and obedience. But what happens next is troubling. After his victory, the people of Israel are in awe of him. They see him as their hero, their savior, and they want to make him king. But Gideon refuses, saying, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Judges 8:23. At first glance, this seems like a noble response. But what Gideon does next contradicts his words. He asks for gold from the spoils of war and uses it to create an ephod, a sacred object that instead of honoring God becomes an idol for the people. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Judges 8:27. The very leader who had once torn down idols in obedience to God now creates one himself. Success had changed him. The hidden danger of success. Gideon's story highlights a powerful truth. The greatest danger isn't failure. It's forgetting who you were before success. Think about it. When we're struggling, we're focused, hungry, and willing to put in the effort. We're careful with our decisions, mindful of our actions, and aware of our dependence on something greater than ourselves. But once we taste victory, it's easy to shift from gratitude to entitlement, from humility to pride, from discipline to complacency. This happens in every area of life. In career and business, a person works tirelessly to build something meaningful. But once they achieve success, they become less driven, less careful, and start making reckless decisions. In relationships, someone fights hard to win the love and trust of a partner. But once they feel secure, they stop putting in the same effort. In faith and personal growth, people turn to God in times of struggle. But when life gets easier, they stop praying, stop seeking wisdom, and assume they can handle things on their own. Success isn't the problem. It's what success does to us if we're not careful. How to stay grounded after success. Gideon's mistake serves as a cautionary tale, but it also teaches us how to avoid the same pitfalls. Here are 3 key takeaways. 1. Remember where you started. Never forget the struggles, the lessons, and the mindset that helped you grow in the first place. Stay connected to your roots and the humility that shaped you. 2. Stay accountable. Gideon had no one to challenge his decisions after victory. Surround yourself with people who will keep you grounded, challenge your choices, and remind you of your true purpose. 3. Never let success replace your values. The Israelites saw Gideon as their hero, but instead of pointing them toward lasting faith, he unintentionally led them into idolatry. Make sure that your achievements don't lead you or others away from what truly matters. Success is not the end, it's another beginning. Many people assume that the hardest part of life is getting to success. But Gideon's story reminds us that what happens after success is just as important. So here's a question to think about. Are you preparing for success, or are you preparing to stay grounded after success? Because at the end of the day, true greatness isn't just about reaching the top. It's about staying humble, focused, and faithful once you get there. True leadership is rooted in humility. What makes a great leader? Is it power, influence, intelligence? Many people associate leadership with authority, with being the one in charge, the one making all the decisions. But Gideon's story teaches us something different. It shows us that true leadership isn't about control, it's about humility. We live in a world where leaders are often defined by their status, their achievements, and how many people follow them. But history has shown that the most powerful leaders are not always the ones with the loudest voices or the biggest armies. Instead, the best leaders are the ones who know how to serve, who lead with humility rather than pride. And Gideon, he gives us a perfect example of this. The test of leadership, turning down power. After Gideon's miraculous victory over the Midianites, the people of Israel are in awe of him. He took a hopeless situation, facing an army of 1,350,000 with only 300 men, and turned it into one of the greatest military upsets in history. The Israelites see him as their savior, their hero, so they make him an offer. Rule over us, you, your son and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian. Judges 8:22. Imagine that for a moment. Gideon, a man who once saw himself as weak and insignificant, is now being offered kingship. He has the chance to establish a dynasty, to take full control over the nation. But what does he do? He refuses. I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. Judges 8:23. This is a rare and remarkable moment in history. Most people, when given power, grab onto it and never let go. But Gideon recognizes something important. True leadership is not about placing yourself above others. It's about pointing people to something greater. Humility in leadership, why it matters. Gideon's refusal of kingship reveals a core principle of leadership. Great leaders don't seek power for themselves. They serve a higher purpose. And this lesson applies far beyond ancient Israel. In every area of life, whether in business, family, or personal relationships. Humility is what separates true leaders from those who simply want control. Think about it. The best business leaders are not those who dominate their employees, but those who empower them. The best parents are not those who demand obedience, but those who guide with wisdom and love. The best teachers, mentors, and role models are not those who seek praise, but those who genuinely invest in others. Humility doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. Instead, it means leading with the mindset that leadership is about service, not status. When leaders lose humility, Gideon's mistake. But Gideon's story doesn't end there. Even though he refuses kingship, he makes a critical mistake, one that serves as a warning for all leaders. He asks the people for gold from their victory spoils and uses it to create an ephod, a sacred object that was meant to honor God but instead became an idol. Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Judges 8:27. This moment shows how easy it is to say we don't want power, but still fall into the trap of influence. Gideon may not have accepted a throne, but he still allowed himself to become a figure of worship, leading the people away from their true purpose. It's a sobering reminder. Even the most humble leaders must constantly check their hearts and motives. How to lead with humility. So how do we apply this lesson to our own lives? Whether you're a leader in your workplace, your family, your church, or your community, here are 3 key takeaways from Gideon's story. 1. Recognize that leadership is a responsibility, not a privilege. The best leaders don't see their position as a way to gain power, but as a way to serve others. Ask yourself, am I leading for my own benefit or for the good of those around me? 2. Stay grounded no matter how much success you achieve. Gideon started as a humble warrior, but after his victory he lost sight of his original purpose. Don't let success change who you are. Keep yourself accountable and stay connected to the values that guided you in the first place. 3. Lead by example, not by force. Gideon didn't demand power, and that's what made him a respected leader. True influence comes not from commanding people, but from inspiring them. The mark of a true leader. At the end of Gideon's life, he wasn't remembered for ruling a kingdom. He wasn't known for wealth, status, or military conquest. Instead, he was remembered as a man who was chosen despite his doubts, who fought against impossible odds, and who, at his best, led with humility. But his story also serves as a warning. Even the greatest leaders can fall when they forget that leadership is not about self-glory, but about service. So here's the question for you. Are you leading with humility, or are you chasing power? Because the leaders who make the biggest impact aren't the ones who demand loyalty. They're the ones who inspire it. Through their actions, their integrity, and their willingness to put others before themselves. Gideon's story is more than just an ancient battle tale. It's a mirror reflecting the struggles, doubts, and victories we all face in life. When you doubt yourself, remember, you are more than your fears. Gideon started out hiding, convinced he wasn't capable, but his potential was far greater than he believed. When you feel uncertain, take action. Faith isn't just believing, it's moving forward even when you don't have all the answers. When you think you don't have enough, remember that strength isn't always found in numbers. Sometimes, less is more when you trust in the right source. When you succeed, stay humble. Gideon's downfall came not in battle, but in the comfort that followed his victory. Success should never lead to complacency. And when you lead, do it with humility. True leadership isn't about power, it's about service. The greatest leaders are those who lift others up, not those who seek their own glory. Gideon's journey, from fear to faith, from doubt to action, from leadership to lessons learned, is a reminder that our own lives are shaped by the choices we make. Will we allow doubt to hold us back, Will success make us lose sight of our purpose? Or will we step forward in faith, lead with integrity, and stay true to our values? Which of these lessons spoke to you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if this video inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay humble, and keep moving forward.